Hi there, strikers. There's something uniquely disturbing about people vanishing into thin air. Read about these incredibly strange, unsolved cases. Although these disappearances span centuries, locations, age ranges, and circumstances, there's one common thread shared between them: a lack of closure. There are theories, speculations, and investigations, but never a decisive answer. On our incoming episode, I'm going to feature some of the cases of mysterious disappearances, of some missing that just disappear without any trace. 10 people who vanished only to mysteriously reappear. List verse across the world. Many people over the years have disappeared, seemingly into thin air, with no satisfying explanation. The mystery is only deepened when neither the missing person nor their remains are ever seen again. However, there have also been many cases of people who disappear in the most mysterious of circumstances, only to reappear, sometimes decades later, in equally mysterious and intriguing circumstances. What follows are just 10 examples of such bizarre cases. These people vanished into thin air and then reappeared just as strangely. Number 1. Amber Smith, discovered in a place previously searched. Although 2-year-old Amber Rose Smith was missing for only a day, her case is truly one of the most bizarre and intriguing. According to her father, the young girl was playing happily at their home, Newego County, Michigan, on October 8, 2013. She was out of sight of her father only briefly as he went into another room. However, upon his return, she was no longer there. 1. A full-scale search involving numerous volunteers was launched almost immediately. However, despite the entire area undergoing absolute scrutiny by the hundreds-strong search party, it appeared that the young girl had seemingly vanished into thin air. The following day, however, as searches continued, Amber Rose was found only a few miles from her home. And what's more, she was discovered in a location that had already been thoroughly searched the previous day. How she had managed to avoid the search teams who went into action so soon after her disappearance, as well as how she had managed to cover so much ground, left searchers and investigators baffled. Number 2. Stephen Stainer, rescues child from the house of his own imprisonment. What is perhaps the most fascinating, if extremely grim, about the case of Stephen Stainer are the events that would take place following his re-emergence in a California police station in 1980 after having been missing for over 7 years. Stephen had been missing since 1972, when he was 7 years old, and had disappeared while walking home from school. His abductor, Kenneth Parnell, would hold him captive for years, sexually abusing him during this time. By the time Stephen was a teenager, Parnell desired a younger boy, and after Parnell brought another abducted child to the house, Stainer was spurred on to escape with the 5-year-old, stating later that he couldn't let another child go through what he had. Parnell was eventually arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison, although he was released after serving only 5 of those years. He was arrested again in 2003 for attempting to procure a 4-year-old boy, in 1989, after gaining national attention for his part in Parnell's arrest. Stephen Stainer was killed in a motorcycle accident at only 24 years old. Incidentally, in the years that followed, though, it would be Stephen's brother, Carrie, who would be in the news. This time, though, as opposed to his being seen as a national hero who performed acts of bravery in the face of such danger and criminality as Stephen had been, Carrie was facing multiple charges of first-degree murder, of which he would be convicted. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison, although he was released after serving only 5 of those years. He was arrested again in 2003 for attempting to procure a 4-year-old boy. In 1989, after gaining national attention for his part in Parnell's arrest, Stephen Stainer was killed in a motorcycle accident at only 24 years old. Incidentally, in the years that followed, though, it would be Stephen's brother, Carrie, who would be in the news. This time, though, as opposed to his being seen as a national hero who performed acts of bravery in the face of such danger and criminality as Stephen had been, Carrie was facing multiple charges of first-degree murder, of which he would be convicted. He was sentenced to death in 2002. Allegedly, Carrie stated he wanted a movie of the week made about his crimes, just like the television movie made of his brother's ordeal. 2. Number 3. Tanya Kuk. Only a few miles from home for a decade when 14-year-old Tanya Kuk of McKeesport, Pennsylvania, vanished one day in 1996, it was assumed, given that she had simply walked out of the family home, that she had run away. In part, that was true. It would come to light a decade later in 2006 that Kuk had been convinced by a security guard at the middle school, Thomas Hose, to run away with him. When she did so, however, Hose would instead hold her prisoner at a house his parents owned. She would remain there for the next 10 years, and Hose would routinely rape and abuse her. After 4 years, Kuk, under a new name, was allowed to leave the house. In 2006, she sought help, telling the owner of a deli, whom she'd become friends with, that she was being held prisoner at the hands of Hose and had been since she was a teenager. It wasn't long before Hose was arrested, charged, and eventually imprisoned. Kuk was reunited with her family. Number 4. Linda Artiga. An incident with the shadow people? One of the most recent of our strange disappearance and reappearance cases occurred on September 22, 2012 in the Arkansas Ozarks. On that afternoon, brother and sister Eddie Huff and Linda Artiga set out for a day's hiking in the forests of the region. However, when Eddie returned alone claiming to have left his sister at a relative's house, something seemed amiss, even more so when it was discovered that the 53-year-old woman was not at the relative's house as Eddie had claimed. Eddie, seemingly with no memory of what had happened, was now confused and a little disoriented, to say the least. A search party was organized, and Artiga was eventually discovered in a seemingly random location in the middle of the deep woodland. What's more, she appeared shocked and unnerved by whatever incident had unfolded and led her here. She would later claim, although the details were murky at best, that her brother had suffered some kind of injury and that she had volunteered to go and find help. She would then state that as she walked through the woods, she came across other hikers who, try as she might, simply didn't seem to be able to hear her when she called out to them. Even more disturbingly, she would witness bizarre, shadowy figures that appeared to be watching her from the trees and bushes. The next thing she knew, she was coming to in the forest with the search party calling her name. This rather bizarre incident remains unexplained.